welcome back, everybody, to another episode with our friend Michael Nouguier, partner at Cybersecurity Services at Richey May. Okay, wow, you've been with us for a conversation of 4 different episodes talking about cybersecurity, and wow, it's really been enlightening. It's been a little bit frightening. So, Michael, welcome back, and today we're going to kind of pull it all together and talk about what to do when this happens. And I think for a lot of us, it's really interesting to think about a plan that we can enact so that when cyber issues occur, we know what we have to do. So thank you for coming back and chatting with us about this.
Absolutely. Happy to be back here. I always love talking with you through these fun, scary, exciting ideas around cybersecurity.
You know, it's really one of those conversations that I hate that we have to have it, but I love that we get to have it, right? I really, really appreciate that we can step into this topic and not just like boo-hoo about it, that we can actually say, okay, how do we empower ourselves to be less vulnerable, Yeah. And so this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And we are so delighted that we can have these interesting conversations each and every day because we have presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. But more importantly, as I introduce Michael Nouguier, partner at Cybersecurity Services at Richey May. Richey May, for a lot of our viewers and the community at large, will know them as what type of organization first?
Yeah, I mean, initially started as an accounting, tax, and audit firm. And as with most, have transitioned into just professional services and consulting and advising. So. And now we have the fun of being in the cybersecurity arena. So,
yeah, it's got to be amazing that to me, when I see that Richey May has, built this side of their business, it's got to be because their clients were having these issues.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's such an interesting thing to see how Richey May would grow because of these external pressures.
That's exactly right. Right. You reach out to the people that you trust, and in some of these cases, right, that's the people that are working through your financials, whatever it might be. And so, hey, we don't know what to do in this case. We're getting hacked, or we need to work on cybersecurity regulation or compliance, and that usually leads to greater conversations. And so, at one point, it was like we should probably do something about that. And so we built a cybersecurity practice that enables our clients to be secure, resilient, vigilant, and compliant.
Yeah, so interesting. I think it's just it's brilliant, but it's also such an indication of how finance and accounting leaks into all parts of our business, right? It's not just something so separate. And I think that's, to me, a fascinating lesson here. And that's why we're working together with you, because I think it's just such a critical time for us to understand that cybersecurity issues are not just for one part of the business. They impact our whole structure. So let's get started with the first concept that we really want to get your opinion on and your wisdom about cyber insurance. First of all, what does it cover and how does it function?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, right? Like cyber insurance is usually a vital aspect to an organization, right? Insurance in general, right? It's always a safety net, a fail safe, right? You're protecting yourself financially in the event that you break an arm, you have health insurance, right? And cyber insurance is no different, right? In the event that you experience a breach or a cyber attack, it's there to help you weather that from a financial perspective, right? Funding things like triage and recovery and remediation, and even the data privacy aspects and the legal aspects of it. So it is a safety net, but it should not be the strategy for sure. Cyber insurance for organizations is very, right, it started off being a very simple thing where you would buy cyber insurance and you were covered. And cybersecurity and cyber attacks have evolved so much over the last couple of decades where you really have to read the fine print, right? It used to just be an add-on on your liability insurance. Now it's its own industry. And so you have to read the fine print to make sure that it covers everything that you need it to cover, right? In some cases, it may not cover reputational damage or donor loss, regulatory fines, third-party impact. It may not pay the full extent of ransomware. It might be limited. So it's really, really important to pay attention to and review those policies with somebody that understands and has been through an incident, what coverage you are getting and how it's going to help you weather a cyber attack, because all insurances are not created equally. And so, but they are vitally important to help you survive financially through a cyber attack.
Michael, do you see that this type of insurance is something that most nonprofits can, umbrella under their other policies? Or is this something that's become so specific that you have to go out into the marketplace and find a different carrier?
That's a really great question, because in the nonprofit sector, you tend to be multi-industry specific, right? You're a nonprofit, but you're focused on healthcare, or you're focused on another industry to some extent. Yeah. And so really cyber insurance is based on the type of data that could be impacted, right? And it's all built by actuaries. And so they're going to do a risk assessment to understand what kind of data do you have and what could the impact be if you were to get breached. And so I tend to find that you can often work with your insurance broker to get cyber insurance added on, but they usually underwrite it through a different company or bring in a different group to do that. And honestly, cyber insurance can be really affordable, right? Sometimes it can be a minor cost to get the coverage that you need to survive. It tends to be that the more data and the records that you can hold and maintain and are responsible for, the more expensive it gets. And so, but really for the smaller businesses, the smaller nonprofits, to even the mid-sized nonprofits, you tend to see really affordable coverage nowadays, especially if you have the right controls in place, right? Like I said, it is a risk assessment. So when you enter into trying to get cyber insurance, they're going to want to understand how risky are you? Do you have basics integrated into your network and into your environment so that you are protected, right? We've talked about this before. Review the other podcasts that Julie and I have done together where we talk about multi-factor authentication, strong password policies, a firewall. All of those things matter, and they lower the cost of coverage when you have those implemented because the risk drops significantly.
Interesting. Michael, I'm thinking about, you lightly touched on this, and I want to, before we move on, ask you about this, because so many of us in the nonprofit sector are using the brilliance of third-party platforms, from donor management to communications to processing things for our clients or for the community, the part of the community that we serve. So we've got a lot of different companies that we're working with that have access to sensitive information, or that we give access to that. How does that all factor in?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of these cases, those third parties, you are the trusted data collector in that case. And so if you are taking it and putting it into those third party systems, donor management, financial systems, whatever it might be, payment card collection, bank account collection, whatever those systems are, you're the trusted person to that individual. And so they're trusting you to have the due diligence to leverage those third parties. And so third party risk is one of those larger aspects of cybersecurity that are starting to impact organizations more and more, because 20, 30 years ago, you used to build all your own integrations, right? And not everything was based on the web, and now everything's based on the internet. And so it's publicly available. And so, and it's cheaper to buy something that's built than it is to build it yourself. And so we leverage third parties, and those third parties leverage third parties. And so you have fourth and fifth and sixth parties that are all involved in this data that you're collecting. And so it's really important to make sure that you've done your due diligence to trust those third parties, because you are trusted with that data as well.
Interesting. So, that's a question that we lightly touched on, but wow, we're going out as nonprofits and looking for these third party, platforms. I got to believe that the majority of us never ask that question. Like, what is your cybersecurity aspect? How do you protect us? I mean, it's a pretty heady issue, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And we've built programs around this because it shouldn't just be a single question, right? The same way that when you go out and get cyber insurance, they're going to ask the same questions that we would want to ask to our third parties is, do you have these things in place? If a breach happens at your organization, do you even have to notify us contractually? Like, that's a huge aspect, right? Because you may not find out until much later that something impacted you because there was no contractual language to enforce them to notify you. And so it's really important to make sure, right? Like, as the trusted organization, you really need to, you are extending that trust, whether you believe it or not, to your third parties. And so it's best to make sure that whatever culture you've built as your nonprofit, you need to extend that same security mindset to all third parties that you're bringing in.
Wow. Okay. That's such a big topic and such a big concept. That's like a whole episode in itself. Because I'm just thinking about how this doesn't get discussed, right? I mean, this just does not get discussed with all of the different parties, the third party platforms that we buy, that we like, we buy their licenses. I mean, it's a heady issue. Let's go on to something that you've used this vocabulary before, and the issue of resilience. And I'm kind of shocked by the concept of that this is cybersecurity and cyber fraud is not just a ding. It's a crippling event that can close an organization down. Can you share with us some of that reality?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more than just, right, having your systems taken down by a cyber attack that impact business, right? Obviously, right, imagine doing a large fundraising event and you couldn't collect funds during that event, right? That could be really, really harmful to that fundraising event and all the time and effort and financial impact that you've put into that to gain from that fundraising. But if you weren't able to collect funds because of a cyber attack, took down the ability to collect on those funds or whatever it might be, you're probably going to feel some impact from that. But the impact extends beyond that, right? There's reputational damage, right? The donors might not want to come back to an organization where their information has been breached in the past. And oftentimes that's the case, right? And so it's important to drive that resilience so that, right, the downtime is minimal. You've focused on prevention and protection as well, so that if a cyber attack does tend to come in, right, you've been able to segment it out and you have this business continuity plan in place to continue business operations in the event that something might have happened, right? It's important to focus on all those aspects.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing because I think a lot of us, we think, oh, this is a disruption and this is a pain and this is a problem, but not that it could literally be a devastation that you can't get beyond. I mean, that you mentioned in the green room, some very long-standing organizations that incurred cybersecurity issues and they had to cease operations.
Yeah. I don't tend to call out names, but I've even been on phone calls with organizations where, right, their entire organization had been encrypted and ransomwared, and through that process, their bank account information, username and password, was also stolen, and all of their bank accounts were drained completely. And so on the call, where we're advising them on how to triage and move through this incident, they basically said, well, we can't make payments anymore. Like, we don't have money. We won't be able to get that money back. And so they just decided to shut down their business because at the end of the day, there was no other way to carry on. And I mean, there's like I said in the green room, right? There's a large university in the U.S. that got ransomware, and instead of trying to fight it, they just shut down. They shut their doors. They had their last semester, and they just ended their tenure in the education industry. So,
wow, yeah. So this is real. Let's talk about the actual response issue, because it seems to me like a lot of us would be like, well, let's hope it doesn't happen, and then when it does, we'll have to figure something out. But I think you're going to advise us that that's absolutely the wrong way to go about this. So we need to back up and come up with a strategy and prepare. And I find this somewhat challenging. I mean, intellectually, I'm like, yeah, I get it. But I find it challenging because we don't even, for the most part, understand what cybercrime is. So how do we figure out a response, right?
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to planning and practice, and right, like, and what I would say is, right, that whole failure to plan is planning to fail. That's that same finger crossing that you did, right? Like, if I wanted to run a marathon, I'm not going to sign up for a 26-mile run and wake up one morning and go do that. Like, you have to put in the work to make sure that you build muscle memory and the capability to actually run miles at a time to be successful in that. And if I did that, I would wake up, I would get a mile maybe into that before I was like, this has been fun. I'm gonna walk away. So, right, like the strategy for incident response is to create a plan and practice. And it doesn't have to be painful. It can be fun. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And practice. Wow. Okay. So talk to us about that. I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we call them tabletop exercises. And so, and we do them, at least quarterly at our organization, sometimes monthly, and you just bring different people in, right? And so annually, at least annually for our organization, we bring everybody in, the C-suite, board, different aspects of the partners at the firm, right? And so we come in and we basically say, we've been breached. And the scenario starts, and we build out a scenario that we've been through before, right? You always want somebody leading this that's done it. You just walk through it step by step. All right, we noticed XYZ happened. We noticed like a phishing email came in. Somebody clicked on it. Their credentials were stolen. The next thing that happened is we started noticing weird things on the network, and our customers are letting us know that they're getting weird emails. And you walk through these exercises and understand what you're going to do. And if you're a Star Trek fan, we always liken it to the Kobayashi Maru, right? Which is an unpassable test, right? Everything you do is never good enough so that you can keep exercising and flexing those different muscles and working those different muscles out so that you can gain that muscle memory, so that when something does happen to your organization, you are able to work through it at every pace. And it's not just technical, right? It can be who's going to notify our donors. Well, it's not going to be the IT guy. He's way too technical, and we don't want to get that technical with our donors. And so we need somebody that has a PR background in order to do this. And then what do we legally have to do and regulatorily have to notify? And so you bring in legal to talk through their aspects and their thought processes. And right at the end of this, you build out a lessons learned where you say, hey, we did these things wrong, and this was an example, an exercise. So now we know what we need to improve on, and we're going to do it again in a year or 6 months to see if we've integrated those things and how well we do there, and what other lessons learned we have from that. So you're continuously improving on that. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, a couple of hours to walk through these types of things, and then from there putting in the work to improve upon that.
Right. I'm absolutely fascinated that you said you bring together the board, the C-suite, programming, other groups. That's really smart, because in my brain, I was thinking, oh, this is for the IT team. Bad approach, right? I mean, you just set yourself up, I think, for more incursions if you don't show everybody how this happens, because it's new and unknown territory for so many of us.
Right. IT and security really only make up like 50% of an incident response, right? The rest of it has to be, what are the legal implications? What are the business impacts, right? What do we tell our customers, our response strategy, our notifications, right? Like, what are we going to do when we have to recover from this? And those shouldn't all fall on the IT staff, because that's not their core focus. So making sure that everybody is involved in it is really important.
Okay, before we move on, I thought of this question yesterday, and it's been like plaguing me so much. And so I was like, I can't wait to ask Michael this question. Who do you call to report this type of crime? Right? I mean, do you call your local police, or do you call the FBI? Or because if somebody breaks into your nonprofit office, or your a vehicle or whatever, pretty much we know who to call, right? We dial 911. But when this type of incursion happens, who do we call?
Yeah, that's really a really good question. The first person that I would call would be local law enforcement, so that you can get a report, right? That's really important. Whether it's a physical crime or an internet crime, all local law enforcement have an internet crimes division, or a policy for internet crimes is what they would call it, like internet crimes or cyber crimes. Okay. Because there's usually a social engineering aspect. Like, these aren't just like random technical hacks. There's some sort of social engineering that usually happens. So it's good to start there. You also report it to the FBI using the Internet Crimes Complaint Center, or IC3.gov.
IC3.gov.
Yes. Yes. In sign language, IC3.gov.
Thank you.
So yes, so you need that. And it's the Internet Crime Center, Internet Crime Complaint Center. Okay. And so whether it was a large impact or a small impact, you can report even a phishing email that you got there. But it's good to start there, because if it was a large impact, the FBI can and sometimes will get involved to assist in this crime, right? You've seen it happen in some of the larger mega breaches that are multi-million dollars, but they will even get involved in other smaller breaches to make sure that right, if there's anything that they can do. Sometimes they can recover funds, sometimes that they can knock on doors and find people. So it's important to get those two things reported through this process, for sure.
Okay, cool. I'm glad. Like I said, that popped into my head yesterday, and I was like, oh man, I've got to ask this question, because I had no idea.
Yeah.
So as we finish up, the immediate steps that we need to take, I can see the arc of this journey being from understanding what it might look like to, having scenario planning, even having our whole team, our whole organization in a practice. But what is it that we should know? This happens. Okay, it's on the list, and this is who's going to take care of what. What are some of those immediate steps that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the first step, as we talked about earlier, is take a deep breath. Right? Like, incidents are like, we can sometimes define them as like the worst day in a businessman's life, right? A business owner's life, right? They can really be impactful, because not only does it take your business down, but it's oftentimes something that we don't understand, right? Like, not all of us can like focus on cyber attacks and understand how they work. So take a deep breath, right? Step number one. Step number two, engage help early, right? Okay. Reach out to your trusted advisors, reach out to your cyber insurance. They're extremely helpful in these cases. And most of the time that I've seen, right, is you call them and they will integrate as quickly as possible. And most people don't want to engage early because they think there's a cost associated with engaging early. And it's one of those, chicken and egg scenarios, better safe than sorry. Like, we didn't know it was a full cyber attack, so we didn't call somebody ahead of time. But, it's in my opinion, it's better safe than sorry. Reach out ahead of time to those that you trust in this case. And then don't delete anything. This is a common thing, right?
Oh, wow. Okay. Talk me through that, because that's interesting.
It happens often when we get into certain different cyber attacks, is that people will shut down their servers or just
Right.
delete the servers. And,
Yeah. Pull back.
from an evidence collection perspective and a forensics perspective, it really could ruin what we're trying to do, right? Like, you want to know what happened, but if you delete everything, we can't figure that out. And so it's always this big question mark. And we see that a lot in incident responses. We don't know how this happened. Things were deleted, right? Evidence wasn't collected. We know what happened. We don't know how they got to this point. And so preserving evidence, not deleting things, not making stark actions. That's why I'm saying get that help early. Get somebody that's very, very knowledgeable around this. Your cyber insurance, your incident response firms, your cybersecurity trusted advisors. Get them involved quickly, so that they can say yes, no, don't do that, do that, things along those lines. Quick and clear communications as well through a cyber incident is very important. And that's just not necessarily to the public, but to your internal staff as well. If something goes down and your internal staff aren't able to work, you don't want them making up stories in their head, right? And they're going to be communicated with donors and clients and customers and whatever it might be. And so they want to make sure that they know what they need to say and how to say it and what they should and shouldn't say.
Right. I think that's really interesting. Gosh, the communications part for calming everyone down is really huge. I've got to believe too that there's probably some sort of like psychological fear factor of being that person that's like, oh crap, I clicked on that, or right, that there's like I don't want to admit, or I don't want to bring this forward because I'm the one that opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah, and that's one of those pieces of advice that I should be giving as well. And I've been in too many incidents where, right, if somebody was just not afraid of losing their job, right, like punishment is a hard aspect for us in the cybersecurity community, right? Like, well, you clicked on this link and now our organization lost a lot of money, so you're fired. Well, if we're trying to figure out what happened and people are afraid for their jobs, we're unable to collect the necessary data. And so it's always important to say, like, honesty is important, right? Letting people know what happened, but also making sure that people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody, and I mean everybody, including yours truly, have clicked on a phishing link in their life. And I do this for a living. And so it's important to note that, like, we make mistakes. People click on phishing links, but it's better that they click on it and then say, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, and then report it, rather than saying, clicking on it and then saying, oh, I don't want to report this, I don't want to get fired. So we have to create, it comes back to the cultural aspect of creating a culture where people can make mistakes from a cybersecurity perspective and they need to report them rather than fearing for their job.
Right. This has been absolutely fabulous. It's a changing target. It's a changing topic. And I'm so grateful that Richey May Cyber would come on and talk to us about this. And I just want to let everyone know, this is a conversation we've had 4 episodes just dedicated to this. Why cyber criminals target nonprofits, which is such a shocking thing, but basically the answer there is because it's easy. And just because you're doing the work of the angels doesn't mean that you're not a candidate for this type of crime. That cybersecurity can be a part of a small budget, and that you have opportunities and sometimes low cost or no cost options. And then how we protect our donor data, and what does that look like, and how should we communicate that? We do talk about third-party software in this conversation as well. And then today, as we've talked about, when disaster strikes, what's your plan? Create a plan, test your plan, and get yourself and your team thinking about what a strategy looks like. I think those are some really invaluable pieces of information. Michael Nouguier, partner Cybersecurity Services at Richey May. You can learn more about Michael and his team and the work that Richey May does across this country at Richey, RICHEYMAY.com. Wow. You know, I always say, Michael, with you, I have like hair on fire moments where you just scare the hell out of me, but then you always give me back like calmness and solutions.
That's the goal, right? And it's the fear is not the goal, but making sure that people understand that, like I said, take a deep breath. Everything's going to be all right. We can get through it.
I love it. I really, really love it. Well, this has been amazing. All 4 episodes, very different, but they all link up to each other and really walk you through the process to be thinking about and strategizing for all of us in the nonprofit sector. 1.8 million registered nonprofits in our country, and that's just 1.8 million organizations that are being preyed upon. And so this is really an important conversation. We are so grateful to be able to have this conversation, and that's because we have our partners, which include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. Okay, Michael, we end each and every episode with this mantra, and today I'm thinking about cybersecurity and our own health and wellness of our organizations. And that the message goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone.